Welcome to another session of the Learner's Mindset Discussion. I'm Dr. Dwayne Harapnik, and my colleague here is
Dr. Talissa Thibodeau.
And today we're going to be exploring a topic that is very, very near and dear to my heart. And it's a topic that I think is quite challenging for some people. Authentic learning opportunities. Authentic learning opportunities. The reason I repeat that is that there's a lot involved in that notion. Some people may view authentic learning opportunities as projects, PBL, project-based learning, project-based instruction. Well, it's a little bit more than just projects because there's an aspect of the real world that has to come into play. That's why we call it authentic learning opportunities. So real world projects for a specific audience that have a benefit for that audience. So something that is real and it's going to benefit others. This is actually a very difficult idea for people to get their heads around. Would you agree with me on that? What are your thoughts on just sort of this big picture of authentic learning opportunities? What are your thoughts, Dr. Thibodeau?
Yeah, I think it's easy to get lost in the PBL. We're doing something great, wonderful, but they're not actually applying it to a real world context. And that's really the difference between, working on something project-based learning and you're doing it in the classroom, or you're doing it bigger picture and actually affecting or impacting other people. So that is a distinction there that I see.
Well, and you know what, that has some ramifications, because I recently was working with an educator from another country, and we were exploring how we may be able to move the CSLE+COVA framework into their university. And with this individual and a few other people, and most people you talk to, you mentioned authentic learning. Oh, yeah, we get it. Yeah, projects. Okay, I got that. And then when we're talking about, well, how do you actually set up the courses and the assignments? And so when he was querying me on the assignments, he, on the one hand, he's saying, yeah, authentic learning, projects. And then, well, so the students write a paper, how many pages in the paper, how many words? And I'll go, well, actually, it's probably not a paper, because the students are doing something real. They might be building a strategy or a innovation proposal, and those are the criteria for that is dependent upon the audience. Or if you're writing an article for publication, well, the publication you're publishing in it is going to determine what the criteria is. So we went back and forth, and at every time that I kept on pointing to authentic learning and the real world projects, well then okay, so if they are going to use videos, they're not going to write a paper. Well, then how many minutes does a video have to be? And, how do you, so it kept on going back to this traditional model of, you ask a learner to do this, regurgitate content, regurgitate information, and you assess it based on a very specific criteria. Yeah, 10-minute video, 2-minute video, a 5-page document, a 10-page document, 1,500 words, 2,000 words. So getting your head around this idea that the actual authentic learning opportunity drives the context for how the assignments are created. So in the DLL program, we have an innovation proposal. So the program uses authentic learning opportunities, as our listeners are probably well aware of. And in that, we ask learners to build an innovation plan, an innovation proposal, an innovation strategy. And that strategy is for the benefit of a specific audience. And that's another area that people really have difficulty, not just getting the head around the authentic project, but that it's not about them. It's about building, creating, and doing something to benefit others. That's one of the biggest challenges. Any thoughts, anything you want to add to that before we dive into this further?
I think I went to a high school yesterday, and one of the questions, and it goes along with what you're saying, is, so I'm the teacher, I'm doing PBL with my kids, we're working on this wonderful project, but the question came into play, well, how does COVA look in project-based learning? What does that look like in project-based learning? And I think there's a little bit of a question about, okay, so some of these things, some of these like requirements that we want them to learn are some of these basic things, but am I telling them what to do? Where is there room for COVA? And that was the main question that she had expressed. I don't know I'm giving them enough opportunities for authentic learning. Am I giving them enough opportunities for choice? And it was interesting that what you're talking about of your experience with overseas and that institution is happening here in the U.S. in a school just in a few towns over. So it's a common thread. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the biggest challenge that we face there, and in the scenario that you talked about, and the scenario that I've been dealing with, is that in most educational environments, the assessment drives all the activity. The assessment drives the project. So unless you can actually get clear on what it is that they're going, or how you're going to assess this, then you don't really have an idea of what content needs to be delivered so that you can assess it effectively. It's completely opposite to what we do with the CSLE+COVA framework. We start with a focus of what is the big goal? What change do you want to make in this environment? And then if you want to make this type of a change, what type of a project do you set up? And then once you take a look at the project you're working on, then, well, how is it realized? So if you're building an innovation plan, well, guess what? You need an innovation proposal. You need some support for it. That support may come in the form of a literature review or a review of what other people are doing. You might have to build an outline of how you plan to move the strategy forward. How do you pitch the strategy to people? So all those things are realized in one of our courses, the innovation course, 5305, where the students build that proposal, they build support for their plan, they build a bit of a small outline or a strategy, they build a video to help pitch the idea, and then they summarize everything into that final post so that when they share it with their audience can go to one location and get a context of what is going to be happening. And again, we allow our students to use video and presentation and Prezi and Canva and you name it, infographics. It just, or it just spans the whole horizon of formats that these things can take because it depends on what your audience wants. And so the challenge that most instructors have in a traditional environment is, well, this is real. I'm just teaching, and how do I assess the real world? Well, by the project and by the results and the process and what people learn through that process. You can see if something's going to work or if it isn't. And even if the project doesn't work, that's part of the learning. Failure is part of the learning, right? It doesn't have to be a completely successful project. As we've learned in the DLL program, less than half of the projects actually, are realized in the way that people plan them. There's often so many shifts and adjustments because guess what? There's nothing like the real world to actually, make your plan authentic. Does that sort of answer your question about why people have the struggle, that assessment focus? What are some of your thoughts? What other things do you think they're struggling with?
Well, even before we go to that, one other comment that this same teacher made was that, shifting the focus to the learning outcomes first was the most, and this was her comment, was the most important thing she learned, because the UBD, or understanding by design piece, is starting out, what do we want our learners to know? What do they care about? What do they want to know? So taking it to the authentic context and then breaking it up, she handed me a paper. She said, look at this. She said, some of this stuff I think they need to know in order to do that. And she said, what do you think? Do you see COVA here? Do you see getting the learner's choice, ownership, voice? I said, yes, here, 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 and here. And here's some basic things you want them to know. So she gave them sort of a guideline. But then down below that was, now you create. Now you do this. And you come up with a purpose for your avatar. This is video game design class. So that candid comment to me, that shifting her focus from these are these standards, these are these things they need to know, to what authentic learning can they do? What avatar can they create that meets all of these standards that they have to learn anyways? And then they can share these and then have these avatars communicate with one another. But the understanding by design process, focusing on those learning outcomes first, I think to her was the most important thing that she got from our program and her experience. So with that in mind, it does bring up something. How do we get folks to kind of shift their focus when they're so inclined to follow the standards, the content, the skills, the curriculum prescribed?
Well, It is a challenge, and if I can sort of plug another one of our videos in our series, we do have a change of focus A and B video that I'm going to include in the notes and on the page when we post this. And it's really a matter of taking a look at that authentic real world project and seeing it there. Well, guess what? If you're building something real, I'm going to use an example that is near and dear because I've been working with my boys on some projects. My older son is working on a new podcast idea, and he's been starting to write for a couple of publications as well. He's a professional downhill mountain bike racer. He races downhill and EWS. But in addition to that, he's looking for ways to help monetize his career, and he also is interested in giving back to the community. And it wasn't until we've been talking about a podcast for a little while, but it wasn't until he realized that, you know what, we live here in North Vancouver, the most amazing place for biking. And he actually works for and is sponsored by one of the 5 or 6 people who actually were the founders of mountain biking in North America back in the 90s. He works with one of the original guys. In addition to that, he's got access to all other 6 or 7 or 8 guys because they all still live here in the North Shore. There's a West Coast style, there's a North Shore mountain biking mystique that you see in the biking community. People come from all over the world to go to the shore and ride the shore or to ride in Whistler. So my son works with these people. And they're his friends, they're his mentors. And so what he's decided to do for his podcast is to share the insights that he has gained from working with these people. So he's going to be interviewing these founders and interviewing all the people who've come here. And the goal is to share the wealth of knowledge, the wealth of information, the wealth of experience that he has at his disposal. And as soon as we start taking the focus away about what he's doing and focusing on how is this going to benefit other people like me who might have this dream, how can my interviewing Wade Simmons or Darren Bearclaw or some of these other people, some of these pillars in the biking community, how will that benefit others? As soon as you started focusing on those things, everything started to come into focus. And so the focus went away from, well, what am I going to talk about, to, well, no, listen, he lives in the most amazing place, and he wants to share that knowledge, the insights, the experience. He wants to contribute to his community. As soon as he's got that bigger focus, as soon as he's looking out there, well, that's not too bad. Then we can clarify, you know what, most people want to listen to these people. 2 talking heads and a video. He's decided he's not even going to bother with a video log. He wants to do the podcast because a lot of his audience ride bike. Guess what? They've got a headset plugged in while they're riding a bike. They're going to be listening to this while they're riding somewhere. So he's recognizing that his audience is going to drive what he needs to do. So by taking the focus off, what's the topic? What should I talk about? To how can I actually share this amazing world that we live in with my audience? Changed everything. Things fall into place. So that, I think, is why a change of focus is so important. You still have to do all the topics. You still have to have a list of questions. You still have to figure out the podcasting. You got to do all that other stuff. It's still there, but it's within the context of that bigger, broader, more important goal. Did that answer your question on that? Hopefully I did.
Yeah. And it's interesting because sometimes we have challenges in the program to get students to that point where they can see that bigger picture. And it takes, it's different for everyone. And some folks kind of start seeing this in the first course, some 5th or 6th course, that the sooner that they kind of, then I'm not just reaching here, I'm reaching there. And they identify that for themselves and they see that big picture, everything changes. Then they start working on something that is not just impacting other people, they're impacting themselves too, and people around them. And it's a positive thing. It's a good thing. And then they learn, like you said, from failing forward. They learn from iterating on their plans and taking the time to invest in themselves and invest in others. And they actually sometimes impact multiple things, multiple people, different funnels. Their pathway, what they think they see and where they think they're going, sometimes goes a complete S-curve. It goes all the way a different way, and they impact people in a way they never expected. So, and I assume this is what's going to happen with your son, because he's not just reaching here, he's looking further than that. So I'm really excited to see what happens there. We'll have to do a authentic learning part 2 at some point, or 3 and 4, to follow up on the story. So I'm always inspired.
Well, I think it's important to follow these things up. And you've touched on something I think is really important that I think we want to cover. And that is, this is not easy and it's scary. It's scary because we don't normally do it. I want to provide another example of why it's scary. And that scariness is real. There's real anxiety to be experienced. So again, I my boys grew up in this authentic learning environment, so this is the way they had. They're my they're my immediate experiments that I can actually share. And we do talk about our DLL students and other students. And before I go into the second example, one of the most common apprehensions students have when they go down this authentic learning path is, well, what if it doesn't work? What if I fail? Oh, that's part of the learning process. Then you pivot, then you adjust, you make those adjustments. And then there's, well, I can really do that. And if it fails, it's okay. I'm not going to get a failing grade. Well, no, because you're going to actually take what you've learned from that problem or that failure and make an adjustment. And going down a certain path, it's not necessarily a failure. You might have realized through experience, that's not going to work. So you maybe step back or you pivot, you go in another direction and go, wow, that's going to work even better. So the running into difficulty is part of the process, but we've insulated our learners from failure because you study, the right answers are in the back of the book, which you're not supposed to look at, and you regurgitate them. And if you do well and you memorize all the right answers, you've passed the test. Good, wonderful. It's all about the right answer. This idea of iterations, about making a mistake, we just don't allow students to go there. So it's scary. Now, one more example of scariness. Younger son started a business just before Christmas, or actually this month it's kicked off, and he's a couple of projects in, and he had the entire month all booked up. And he had a cancellation. A $4,000 job canceled. He's got rent to pay. He's got, oh, what am I going to do now? This job canceled. Well, guess what? He reached out to the community. He was managed to pick in 2 or 3 little jobs that sort of filled in some of the blanks. Okay. So there's this constant adjustment. Things don't always go the way that they're supposed to. There's always changes. There's always adjustments. He starts down this path and this isn't working. Then he has to adjust. He makes a mistake. He has to redo different things. He's setting up his new workshop. He's got a brand new shop that he's working out of. He's renting some space. And so setting up, he had a plan for how he was going to set up his storage, and it didn't work. He had to modify halfway through because he's actually looking at, how do I create my environment so that I can be productive? And as he's working, he's making adjustments. We're doing that all the time. And so it's not uncommon for him to come home at the end of the day and talk about the amazing things, and this is working great, or, Dad, that's not working. What do you think I should do here? And there are times when things aren't working well. He gets a cancellation and he's just, oh, Dad, how do you deal with this? Like, how am I going to pay the bills? And some of these people are so unreliable. When it comes to committing to the money, they don't always commit. But he's been fortunate enough to have enough things in the funnel, so to speak, so that he's a couple months ahead in booking appointments, and there's many, many different opportunities that are there. But the anxiety of doing stuff that is real is a daily thing that he has to deal with. Right now, I've lived this way. I've been in business all my life, and I let him know, guess what, Caleb, it's never going to go away. That anxiety, that not knowing, the fear of failure, get used to it. You're never going to feel good about it. You're just going to get used to it. But he knows that it's part of the course, right?
And that you just clearly articulated in my mind for me. If we want our learners to, prepare for a test, content, recipe, and regurgitation, that's a great path to go. But if we want to prepare them for life, we have to give them authentic learning opportunities along the way. Otherwise, they're just going to default into the, let's get past this test and move on to the safe method. to be entrepreneurs, to be innovative, to be different, to be able to handle life and understand those anxieties long before you even get there, at least to know that that's coming. It's important that we start changing and shifting the way we're teaching and learning, unschooling people so they can learn how to live life, you know? And that piece is so important to me. It impacts the way I think. It impacts the way it impacts where I want to even send my kids to preschool. Are they giving these kids opportunities for problem solving? I have little ones, you know, and it's so important to me because not all kids are going to go the college route, you know, and right now sometimes the college route is, you know, the recipe regurgitation, reading the book, getting the right answers, just check the glossary, look at the definition, regurgitate that on the test. You got this. But life is different than a test. And we have to get past that in our public schools. I say this because I've been in the public school system where my mind was, I should be spending more of my time and my mind on problem solving, authentic learning than worrying about a test as a teacher. You know, how do we get over that hump in our public schools?
I think it's going to take a lot of work, and we do it by creating those significant learning environments where you give learners choice, ownership, and voice for authentic learning opportunity. It's really the COVA framework, and
Yeah.
we're going to start changing the world one learner at a time. We are. I firmly believe that. Now, there's something else I want to share with you about this, and this is something, again, this is an anecdotal observation. Um, my my boys have always been entrepreneurial and always have done different things, and and they hang out with a lot of different people. We live in probably one of the most affluent places in British Columbia, perhaps in Canada. We're here in the North Shore, North Vancouver. West Vancouver is probably the only more affluent area of Vancouver. And so a lot of the young guys, 19, 20, 21-year-old guys and gals that my boys hang out with, my oldest is 22, so, you know, 20 to 22 year range, and a little bit older, a little bit younger. A lot of these kids are going to university. They're enrolled in UBC or Simon Fraser, you know, some of the best schools in the country. Or if they aren't enrolled in school, they're working at a specific technical, you know, programming, technical trade or something. They're usually very, very secure, right? And so they're either in university or they're working at a job that's unionized and they get a good pay and everything's taken care of. It's interesting though. I see these young guys and gals from both university and from the working world. They hang out with Caleb and my older son Levi, but Caleb in particular, and they hang out a lot. And I hear them saying, "Oh man, I wish I had the guts to do what you're doing, Caleb. This is so much fun. Oh, my mom and dad would just kill me if I tried to do this." You know, the conversations. You know, most of the guys who are in university are lamenting the fact that, "Oh, what I'm doing is so boring. We don't learn anything. You know, I got to go to class." And so they finish class and they come over to the shop just to hang out, and to live that life of authenticity that Caleb is living. Now, they have the benefits, right? They get to see all the wonderful stuff. They see the benefits, the final projects, but they don't have all the risk. They don't have all the anxiety that he does. You know, so I think what I'm seeing in his community is that our young men and women are always going for that safe bet, whether it's university or a typical job, and that's fine. But there's so few who are willing to go down that entrepreneurial bent. They're really, Caleb, most of my boys don't know any other guys who are doing what they're doing. There's so few. No, it's a good thing. Less competition for them, right? But it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing for our society. Where's the innovation? If everybody's taking that safe route, if everybody's enrolled in, well, my mom and dad wanted me to take engineering and that's what I need to do. I really don't like it. I'd much rather be focused on writing. I wouldn't mind doing drama, but I'm supposed to be an engineer. Because of these safe routes that a lot of our young people are taking, the creativity, the innovation, the breakthroughs that we've seen in North America up until this point, I think have the potential to be limited. That entrepreneurial spirit, that spirit that we've seen drive North America to be one of the most amazing places to live. I think we're starting to see it quenched a bit by safety, by security. This is the right way. This is the steps you need to follow. Here's the recipe. Here's the code. This is all spelled out. Do you get good grades? Go to university. 4 years, you get a degree. Yes, then you're going to have a job. Yeah, is that really working? I don't know. I'm concerned. I'm very, very concerned about that. And I'm also concerned about the fact that these young men and women are actually lamenting that they don't have the courage to try to do these things. That concerns me the most. What are your thoughts on that?
It's just easy in a situation that a school setting that just perpetuates, the testing and move on and testing and move on and testing. It's easy to go to university and do that, especially if you're getting that kind of pressure from your parents. What I'm finding is people are not happy in their jobs when they're doing something that is not something they are passionate about, and part of going down that authentic learning is discovering your passions. Who are you? What do you want to do? Look what your boys have done. And I became a teacher. I worked in public ed for 11 years because I had a passion for helping people, and I still do. But what I found in being creative in my classroom was sometimes stopped by okay, we're shutting down the month of January and February because testing's in March. And so guess what that does to our learners? So they start to then live this cycle that we lived. And it's pushing them down as opposed to bringing them up, which is counterintuitive to what we really want to do to our kids. I think if I was in the classroom today, I would be one advocating for something a little bit different than what we're doing. We need to really focus on those authentic learning opportunities, and that test will take care of itself. Because they'll learn those skills that they need along the way. And that's a tough one because numbers, accountability, got to report this to the state, all of these things come into play. And our learners in the DLL program are constantly caught by that. And they're asking me questions. How am I supposed to do COVA and have a significant learning environment when I've got tests down my throat? Guess what? There are opportunities for this. You just have to see them. So that tells me maybe their focus is not fully shifted yet, but they will. They'll get there. They'll see those opportunities. It doesn't have to be all the time and everywhere. There are opportunities for it. And that's one thing I question a lot when I'm teaching 5305, where they develop their innovation plan, or in 5313 is, I can't do it all the time, so I'm not doing it at all. No, you know what? Look for those opportunities. Give your kids a chance to go down paths. Give your kids chances and opportunities to flop and then pick themselves back up, or find a new way to do something. That's authentic learning, something that's important to them too, and discovering their passion along the way. That's my thinking.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really important point, and we actually addressed this in our Genius Hour discussion. We talked about the fact that if Genius Hours is so wonderful, why are we only doing it for that 20% time, that 15%? Why don't we do it 80% of the time and then focus on the test for 20% of the time? Why don't we flip that? So we talk about flipped classroom or blended learning, but why don't we flip that? And you're right, we do live in a system where we do have accountability, whether it's state or on a national level, and testing is a reality that our kids are going to face. We can prepare the kids for that. Mm-hmm. But we can also prepare them for life. I think we need to find that balance. And I would argue that if we focus more on preparing them for life and then prepare them to do the test, I think it's a better balance than the 20% time on Genius Hour or allowing them to build whatever they want. I think if you focus on 80% authenticity and then 20% testing, I think you're going to get the results that are going to satisfy both groups. And it's also recognizing that we live in the real world. You've got that tension. You got to find that balance. So it isn't one or the other. Yeah, it's both at the right time, at the right context, the right place. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity that we have to change the world one learner at a time if we focus on preparing our learners for life, for the opportunities. I'm going to say something that I apologize as a repetition. We live in the most amazing time to be a learner. The abundance that we have, the technology that we have, the opportunities that we have, it's just staggering. It gets better and better and better. Yeah, there's problems, there's challenges, there's social issues, there's all that. But the opportunities are just amazing. And I think we owe it to our learners to prepare them to just embrace those opportunities. I see Caleb and Levi's friends. They're just, there's one young guy who's just, he's going to finish his apprenticeship in one thing, and then he's going to quit his job and start working with Caleb. So he's talked about that. So I got my security, I'll get my ticket in one area, and then I'll do something else. That's okay. Why not have that security? That's great, right? Because he's spending more and more time, and he's seeing that, you know, the dream that Caleb has is actually similar to his dream, and they're good friends and they're working together. So you know what? Have that little bit of security, and but then once you've got that, step out, and see if you can change people's lives around you, make the
Yep.
world a better place. Yeah.
Oh, I think we've covered this topic pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. That might be a good point to end. So, as always, thank you so much. I enjoy these discussions, and I'm looking forward to next week's.
You
Take
know what's
care.
quite interesting is these are pretty authentic. We don't rehearse these.
Oh, we're walking the talk. Yeah, they are. They are authentic. I already said, you know, goodbye, and yeah, they are. They're not scripted. Although I had a few notes just to
Well,
remind myself
you're
of where we're going.
better
Yeah.
than me. Okay. Looking forward to next week.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Take care.